Good afternoon, everyone. I am Lisa Lord, and thank you for joining for this media update surrounding the La Soufrière volcano in St. Vincent, which continues to affect us here in Barbados with persistent ashfall. Now, as a result, everyone will be joining this briefing virtually. We will be addressed by Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, the Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, and Dr. Owusu Joseph, the Director of the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center. Now, for the purposes of this briefing, we will also be joined by the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kenneth George, Mr. Roger Blackman, the Managing Director of the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited, as well as Mr. Keith Roy Halliday, the General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, who will be available to answer any questions. And we will begin with Minister Abrams.
Thank you very much, Lisa. Good afternoon, Barbados. We come to you again in what has proven to be an evolving, difficult time. Everyone is aware of the situation going on in St. Vincent with the continual eruptions, major eruptions of the La Soufrière volcano and its threat to the persons of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but also the effects of that volcano being felt as far east as Barbados or past Barbados. There are a number of reasons for this. As I said, this is a completely evolving situation that has never happened in the living memory of most of us. And we will come to you from time to time as the circumstances warrant to update you and to answer your questions. To show you how evolving the situation is, when we spoke to you last, we were concerned about a little dust. Now the whole of Barbados is caked in dust. In St. Lucie itself, night fell in the middle of the day yesterday, and this is continually happening. We have been reaching out to all of the scientists available to us. We touched base, the Prime Minister touched base today with the seismic department from the University of West Indies and spoke to their technical persons and their scientists there who will update you further. But this is a case where we are pretty much flying the airplane as we build it. We are learning on the ground of some things we did not know before. We're having to deal with a situation that we cannot predict because it is, in the truest sense of the word, an act of God. But we are aware that a number of Barbadians have been posing questions to us on social media. They've been reaching out to the Government Information Service or through our media partners. They've been asking questions that they need answered. And so far, we've been able to give you medical information from the Chief Medical Officer, veterinary information from the veterinary department. We've been able to advise you in relation to water. And Sabu Best has done an excellent job from the Met Office in trying to notify Barbadians at least 90 minutes ahead of the dust clouds coming in our direction. So people have been, in some measure, able to prepare themselves, but it goes a lot deeper than that. So the persons who are on this call today are going to address some of the deeper questions that have not been asked before. We're going to keep this press conference very, very tight, and the questions from the press will be tight afterwards because the persons from UE, they are the same ones who are advising the governments of the Caribbean. They're the same ones who are monitoring. They're the same ones who are advising the Prime Minister of St. Vincent and Grenadines. So they've done us a great service in coming on this conference and this outreach to Barbadians to educate us and inform us as to what is really going on. But we are aware that their time is pressing. So I will go no further at this point in time, but I will invite the Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley, to take it from here, PM. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister. Ladies and gentlemen, let me say that I am accustomed to many things, but this is a first. And it is a first for us as a nation in recent times to have to deal with the scale of the ash fall that we've had to. When I last spoke to you on Thursday, I indicated that as a young child, I would have remembered the eruption in 1979 and the extent to which the ash just literally, we were outside eating and all of the ash came in the glasses and everything. I have no recollection of it being as comprehensively hazardous to the country as I see now. And as a result, over the course of the weekend, we have remained engaged. I want to thank the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center Many people ask, and as a former Minister of Education, I know it well, why do we pay money every year to the Seismic Research Center, even though we don't have a volcano or we don't normally suffer from earthquakes? We've shown in recent years that we do get earthquakes, and we're now showing, regrettably, that we do suffer the negative consequences of volcanic eruptions within the region. As bad as it is, it can be worse. And that's the first thing that we need to recognize, that we are living in uncertain times. Indeed, on Thursday, when I spoke to you, that was the theme of much of what I said, that the uncertainty of all that we face is what we have to recognize, and don't be surprised by it. We're going to go through a number of people today, but I want first and foremost to ask Bajans we don't need to panic, and we certainly don't need to do things that escape common sense. The one theme throughout this is going to be that we're going to fight this with sense, common sense. It may need a few cents and dollars too, but the first thing that we need is common sense. Mercifully, on Friday afternoon, I would have spoken to Mr. Roger Blackman as well at Barbados Light and Power, and they had taken a number of precautionary steps. He's here this afternoon to speak with us too. I'm hoping that Mr. Thompson from TMR will also be here. But basically, we've already taken some steps. Before I invite Dr. Joseph to address us on what really is it that we're facing and how long, because it's one thing for me as Prime Minister to tell you that I don't know, but in these matters, I've taken the advice of scientists, and I believe that the country must also benefit from the advice that I've taken. Similarly, we know that Prime Minister Gonzalez has been in daily contact, of course, with them up there. And Dr. Joseph, it perhaps is appropriate now for me to invite you to say a few words and to explain to Barbadians, because the majority of this country, believe you me, we do not know anything about ash in that sense. We are not a country that has been seized in understanding what you do when a volcano erupts, all of these things. And one of the things that I'll start with, which is counterintuitive for many of us, is if St. Vincent is to the west of us, why are we getting the ash when in truth and in fact we normally get northeast trade winds? And I think it is the explanation as to how the propulsion of the explosion into the jet stream will lead to different wind cycles. But I don't want to be the scientist because I'm not. So with that, I'll pass on to you, Dr. Joseph, and I'll come back on after you speak and ask you if any further things need to be clarified. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. And I think you've actually accurately captured what is happening, in that the height of the eruption columns, they're taking the bulk of the ash into the upper levels of the atmosphere, and the winds and the wind direction at that height, and this is above 15 kilometers, above 10, is bringing those winds directly west onto Barbados. And then sometimes it actually loops around. So it's possible that even if you miss the first impact, it will swing around and bring it back onto you from a westerly direction. So sometimes you get it straight on from the east, and sometimes it may approach from the west. So, it's possible to have it coming from both sides of the islands, the leewards as well as the windward side. The reason why this is happening now, and it's so much, is because of the type of eruption that's evolving. This particular eruption, while showing very similar effects or characteristics as the 1979 and the 1902 eruptions, in terms of both associated with ash columns and pyroclastic density currents, PDCs, what in the past has been called pyroclastic flows and surges. This is being seen with this eruption, as well as I said, the 1902 and the 1979 eruption. However, what is different about this one is these jetting and the height of the ash columns that are being generated. This was not seen in the previous eruptions in 1902 and in 1979. So this is why unfortunately, Barbados is being affected in the way in which it is right now by the ash. And of course, the volume of ash that's being generated from these vertical eruption columns.
May I ask you, Dr. Joseph, what would be the reason for the difference this time around with the level of vertical column and the magnitude and the scale of the propulsion, I would imagine, hence being able to reach here?
So this is somewhat a hypothesis. I mean, I'm just giving you some information based on what we have. This is, of course, ongoing, as you know, and more research is being done as we go ahead, as we gain more information about it. The fact that in December of 2020, that we began to see the effusive dome being formed at the summit of the volcano meant that, and there was very little precursory activity associated with this, it meant that the magma was finding a very easy, for lack of a better word, well lubricated pathway to the surface. And this may have been a remnant of the 1979 eruption, meaning channels that were already, not easily broken through. So it means that successive eruptions, such as this one, would have already had an easier pathway to make its way to the surface, tapping into the deeper magmatic system. So that being the case, this may be one of the reasons why we're seeing this, this more material being able to make its way to the surface in the form of these eruptions that are now occurring. Explosions, sorry.
Prime Minister, you're muted.
And are you in a position to say whether we have passed the worst or not passed the worst? I mean, from your perspective, for ordinary people, that's what the average person really wants to know. We had this yesterday, we had this today. Will we have it tomorrow or next week?
So unfortunately, the worst case scenario is that this can go on for weeks because of the changes in the dynamics of the system. We just have to kind of keep monitoring the seismicity associated with the volcano and advise based on that. But given the previous eruptions, they've lasted 6 months to a year. So, and this is the long-term span of the eruption, but in terms of the worst, the worst of it could be days to weeks.
Could be, sorry, I missed the last part. How could be how long?
Days to weeks.
Days to weeks.
Yes, but of course, we will update as more monitoring data comes.
I just wanted the public to hear you say that, because it is important that people understand that when I say that there is a period of uncertainty, that they understand that that uncertainty is very much real, and that there is no one who can tell us how long this will last for. And that what we have to do is to stay glued to regular communications. And I think Minister Abrams already pointed out that the Barbados Met Office will alert the country when there have been explosions that potentially can affect us all. Okay. What is also important is that we would need to know, and I believe that you can also help me very quickly with this, that some of the guidance relates to the fact that the ash on the roof, that invariably the international volcano, what's the name of the entity again, please?
IVHHN, International, it's the Health Hazard Network. It's National Volcanic Health Hazard Network.
And I'm asking Minister Abrams, please, and I think your office was very good, Dr. Joseph, to also agree that they would share stuff with us that we can get out to Barbadians, both on social media and traditional media, as a matter of urgency, because you need to be able to keep cleaning. Can persons wait until all of this ash comes before they start cleaning, please?
No, and this is unadvisable. So as best as possible, if you can deal with it in small increments so that you can avoid buildup, this is the best advice. So remember the dust mask. It's not just any dust mask. I mean, the preferable one is the N95 one because of the fine particulates involved. But if you don't have that, then, you know, a dust mask at least. You wear long clothing, long sleeve clothing, and long pants to avoid as much of the contact with the ash as possible, because it can, you know, it can be irritating to your skin. And while it is still dry and of not accumulated in, you know, in terms of fresh still, you try to sweep it up as best as possible, collect it in garbage bags. You know, light, very, very light dustings you can wash off, but the predominant amount of ash should really be swept off and collected in garbage bags if possible. So you avoid wetting it. I'm so sorry.
And certainly heavy wetting, but the difficulty that we have is that the rain has fallen both last night and it's still falling in Barbados now. So your advice, once it gets wet like this, what is your advice in terms of cleaning, please?
So you would still have to shovel it up as best as possible, but the weight of the ash is what will become challenging, because the wetter it is, the more dense it is, and it will be heavy. So you want to get rid of it while it's still as dry as possible. But a light dampening is fine in order to keep it down, you know, from remobilizing and stirring up in the air. And then you shovel that up or sweep that up, put it in garbage bags and seal that. The fact is, with the rainfalls already, as you mentioned, Prime Minister, that it's already wet. So, you know, it will just be manpower, shovels and strength to try to get that ash, you know, into bags.
Yeah. Thank you very much, ma'am. I'm going to ask if you can hold on, if you don't mind. I know that it's a busy time for you. Do you have the time that you can stay with us a little longer?
Yes,
Thank
I can
you so
stay for
much.
a few moments.
Thank you. Fellow Barbadians, as you've heard from Dr. Joseph, this is nothing to play with. And what I'd like for you to do, for me almost immediately, is where we can start the cleaning process around our houses, in our houses, but particularly around our houses, we do so. One of the things that was very clear, however, and I want to repeat the warning, is that even as you go to clear your house or go to clear your roof or whatever, it is extremely slippery. And therefore, they've said that a lot of accidents happen actually when people are cleaning, so that we really do need people to take additional precautions when seeking to clean at this stage. The second point that I want us to be aware of is that water actually makes it heavier. And therefore, what we need is a little water, but a lot of muscles and a lot of shovels. A little water, a lot of muscle, and a lot of shovels, and great care. And I'm repeating myself so that persons can be very, very clear that it makes no sense putting this off. The ash is going nowhere. The more you put it off, just the more volume and weight you're going to have to deal with. So you have heard me over the last 3 years talk about many hands make light work. We'll add to this, we need more than one bite of the cherry, and then we need many hands to make light work. So we're going to have to go back at this and over and over and over until it's finished. But at the same time, we want people to work together in communities where possible. Now, I'm going to stop at this stage, and I'm going to ask Mr. Roger Blackman from the Barbados Light and Power first to speak to us. And then is Mr. Thompson here from TMR?
Yes, he is.
And I'm going to ask Mr. Thompson then to speak, and then Mr. Halliday. But in between each one, I may come back, Lisa, and ask them some questions just to clarify for the public, if you don't mind, because this is an experience for all of us. Thank you very much. Mr. Blackman.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, Barbados. As I would have indicated to some of you earlier, there's been no major impact on the national electric grid at this time. However, we aren't resting on our laurels. We continue to monitor systems closely, We're managing situations or reports as they come in. They are the standard routine calls that we respond to on a daily basis, and those continue to come in. And of course, the ash can be highly conductive, especially when wet and the conditions are wet out there now, and therefore can have some impact on operations. So, for example, it can coat insulators, which can cause tracking or sparking. And so if customers out there are seeing any sparking wires or anything like that, we encourage you or ask you to contact us at our emergency number, 626-9000. And we have additional crews in the field today that will respond to those situations, but no need to panic. In fact, our insulation levels are designed for higher voltages, both at the high voltage and the low voltage levels than we currently operate at. So there's a level of protection already built in, or mitigation already built into the design. Additionally, the substations, most of our substations, almost all of them are indoor designs, which is somewhat unique in the Caribbean. But again, it was done that way for resilience, and that provides us with a level of protection as well compared to an outdoor design, which is fairly common elsewhere. Notwithstanding that, we do have a plan over the next few days to assess and wash down equipment and do the relevant inspections over the next few days. As you would have heard the Prime Minister and others say just now, we won't wait. You can't wait for the ash to build up. We need to deal with it in increments or in phases. Also want to remind customers, because I have been getting some reports, not to spray water on their meters or service connections. That's not advised. Again, it's more muscle power that should be used. Use your broom to brush ash away from meters if that is the situation that you're facing. But you shouldn't be spraying water on meters or service connections. So just a reminder there. As far as the generating equipment side of the business is concerned, the risk that we face there is largely in relation to the air intake equipment. Of course, on all of our generators, we have air filtration systems, and we're monitoring those closely. Once we see signs of differential pressures building up, we have plans in place. We have adequate spares, and we have plans in place to manage that if the situation arises. Thus far, we haven't seen any issues. And we also have pre-filter material that can be used as well to speed up that process if something does arise on the generating side of things. Naturally, solar PV systems across the island are mainly down, including ours, as is to be expected. But again, this isn't an issue for us because we maintain more than enough sufficient or adequate reserves for a firm capacity to meet the demand. So there's that backupness there. What it does do, though, is it reinforces the importance of having firm capacity and backup supplies for events like these or major weather events that can significantly impact solar supplies. Even the battery backup systems, and we have some of those as well, they're typically air cooled, and so they can be impacted as well. So as an island, as we transition, we have quite significant amounts of solar already installed, but as we transition, we need to make sure we have, and we do have those things in place, firm capacity supplies to provide the necessary backup. So I think it really is just to assure public that the electricity system is holding up well. There are no major issues. We have additional crews out there. Call us on our hotline as required. Again, 626-9000. If you see wires down, of course, don't touch them. Stay clear, call us. The final thing maybe is to remind people to pay attention to legitimate news sources, because we have been, and our social media channels, we have been seeing some fake news going around about charging devices and so on. But you can get, the correct information from our social media pages. So I think I'll pause there, Lisa, and hand back to your PM.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman. We'll now go to Mr. Halliday from the Barbados Water Authority.
Just to say, Lisa, before we go to Mr. Halliday, I want to thank Mr. Blackman and Leighton Power, and also for what they're doing. I'd like to remind them to work jointly with Public Affairs Unit with respect to sharing information, particularly for people with PV panels, and also with respect to, you're using a lot of fancy language to say that it can be a conductor. I want to break it down in simple language, my brother, for the average person, and so that people understand that don't play with this. You understand? Because this is what is at stake. Yes, Lisa. Who are we going to next, please?
We were going to Mr. Halliday from BWA.
Thank you.
Mr. Halliday?
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Prime Minister. Good afternoon. Like Roger, we really wanted to assure the public that our water quality is sound and our delivery services remain intact. There's been a lot of concern about the vulnerability of our systems, and I'm glad to be able to have the opportunity to once again assure Barbadians that in effect we have a closed network distribution system. What that means is that our system is principally secured or sealed. Our reservoirs are sealed, and because we rely principally on water abstraction from the ground, whether we treat it through our well pumping system or through a desalination system, that water is secured up to the processing of our reservoirs into our distribution system. So I need everyone to understand you need not fear about the water quality. You need not fear about contamination. It is not vulnerable to ashfall. It is well secure. We have stressed that on a number of occasions, and I needed to make that again. We are aware that there's some misinformation that's circulating and one or two viral videos that claims that our reservoirs are either contaminated or will be contaminated, and that is not the case. There have also been references to cave systems being vulnerable or being able to produce contaminants into our system. We, in fact, only have one such cave system, which feeds our Bomiston system, and there's already a procedure and protocol whenever we have heavy rainfall or whenever we have runoffs in the way in which we treat it, in the way in which we manage the turbidity in that system. And in that respect, also, Bomiston produces about 4% of our water island-wide. So we still have most of our system well intact, well secured from any possible contamination. So I wanted to stress that in terms of the ash on the ground, the way in which our system works, we have a very natural filtering system that works very well for Barbados. The ground cover or the soil cover actually retards any pollutants, most pollutants from reaching our aquifer. And the filtration system on its own works very, very well. So again, in that respect, we are not fearful. We want to assure Barbadians. We have gone through this before. We know what to expect. And therefore, you will not need to have any real concerns about our aquifer being infiltrated or our aquifers being polluted. The other thing we need to stress really is the fact that we do serious water quality tests. While WHO asks us to do about 50, we do up to 200 such quality tests on average a month. So at all times, we are making sure that our water quality is what it should be. And lastly, to add to the concept really where we need to use lots of muscles and little water, we just want to remind everyone that notwithstanding, we are in a drought, or rather we are in the dry season. And I want to encourage everyone as much as possible to apply a little elbow grease, use a muscle, lots of effort in that sense, and to minimize the use of water and to be judicious in the use of water. Wherever you can, manage your water usage very carefully across the upcoming days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Halliday. Prime Minister, we do have the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kenneth George, with us as well.
Yeah, before we come to Dr. George and Mr. Thompson, just to break it up for persons, Mr. Halliday and Mr. Blackman addressed an issue that I have been addressing for the last year. And I want to speak very directly now to Barbadians, because this notion, technology has done wonders for us on so many levels. In fact, the mere fact that the seismic research people can advise us ahead of time, that's wonderful. 100 years ago, we didn't have that. But technology has also released a new and unfortunate virus called fake news. And that fake news virus is killing us. It is killing us, whether Mr. Blackman from Barbados Light and Power told you how they're having to fight against it. Mr. Halliday from the Barbados Water Authority has told you how they're having to fight against it. And I can assure you that other people throughout the region last week, I had one on me that I called the Deputy Commissioner of Police. This fake news is literally causing people to get themselves involved in trouble. I want to stress, one, that those of you who know people who love doing these memes and sending out these things, make sure that what you are circulating can be accurately verified or validated. If not, do not send it. Send a picture of somebody dancing, send a picture of somebody singing, but don't be sending pictures about things related to how to deal with light and power or water or medical issues unless you're satisfied it's coming from an official source, namely the government of Barbados' sources, the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center sources. There are a few official sources, and we all know the credible news entities. Barry, all of you all need, CBC, you need to be able, VOB, we need to reinforce the notion that take it from the official news source. And to the rest of the people who see people doing it, tell them, cut it out. I've had to use that phrase too many times in recent times. The second thing is, of course, and Minister Abrams is aware of this, nature abhors a vacuum. And that is why we are going to be communicating with the Barbadian public regularly, because if you have a vacuum, that is when this fake news then starts to predominate. And in many instances, there are even fake pictures. It's not just fake news, it's fake pictures of what the volcanic eruption looks like. And I was very clear to understand from the scientists, and Prime Minister Gonzalez also would have addressed this issue, that this is not your typical storybook picture of a volcano with magma, lava running into the sea and all of that. The type of volcanoes that we have, and Dr. Joseph, you may just want to reinforce this point for me, is really about propulsion of ash. I'll pause for you to do that, please, because I think it's important for people to understand that they really need to take advice from the experts. Ma'am?
Thank you so much, Prime Minister. And yes, we've also had that challenge with misinformation, with pictures of the volcano being shared, or of other volcanoes being shared, and people saying that it's La Soufrière. In addition to which, they've also shared misinformation about other volcanoes being active, as well as volcanoes in the Caribbean being linked, so that activity at one is, expected to cause a reaction in another. So just to reiterate, that is not the case. All volcanic systems are independently, they operate independently. They're independent systems with their own magmatic systems. With respect to the kind of magma that we have in the Lesser Antilles, yes, our volcanoes tend to have very sticky, viscous magmas that tend to form domes rather than flows. The basaltic magma that's seen in Iceland and Hawaii and so on, those are the ones that form flows and can travel very far away from the vent. Whereas ours doesn't flow very far from the vent. It stays close to and forms domes. And then the pressure builds up beneath these domes and then explosion. And then that we go through this whole series of dome growth and explosion, as can most people would remember with the Soufrière Hills volcano in Montserrat.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. And PM, I do believe we were going to Dr. George, the Chief Medical Officer.
Dr. George, boy, you in this all the time. This time you could, for a different reason. Talk, brother. Your mic, sir, your mic.
Thanks so much. And just would like the public to know that during the period of ashfall, that you need to take protective measures, particularly those who have respiratory conditions such as asthma, such as chronic obstructive lung disease, persons with acute sinusitis or sinus problems, persons with eye allergies. Those persons need to make sure that they are not in direct contact with the chemicals and irritants that are found in the ash plumes. So just be careful. Those persons are best managed indoors. We would hope that in an indoor setting that you keep your windows and doors closed, and that you make sure that you have, particularly for asthmatics, preventative medication, such that you can be that can be used for acute disease such as wheezing. For those who must traverse the outside, please use long sleeve clothing, You may have to put on goggles, particularly when the ashfall is dense. Please use your mask. We are in a COVID situation, so please remember that this is also foremost in our thoughts, and follow the direction of public health officials. I endorse what the Prime Minister said, GIS, public health officials, the meteorological services. Those are the types of agencies that will provide good and credible information. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Dr. George. Prime Minister, I believe you wanted to go to Mr. Peter Thompson from TMR.
Yes, before we go to Mr. Thompson, I'd like the technical people to put up a video, to share a video with the press conference of the Bridgetown port, and immediately after the Grantley Adams Airport. And then we go to Mr. Thompson, and then we go to what happens tomorrow. But as they do that, let me just say on the fake news part, and this is critical, as I said, we will ask Commissioner of Police to follow up on these issues, because this now can lead to the loss of somebody's life or to the injury of someone if we continue to have people operating on the basis of news that's not accurate. So I really want to underscore that. Let us stick to what is accurate. Mr. Young, are we in a position to upload at this stage, please, Lisa?
I'll await confirmation
Yes.
from Mr. John.
Yes.
Yes, we are.
And what we're seeing there now is the Bridgetown port. You will believe that this is snow day in Barbados. I don't mean to make light of it, but Barbadians, and when I tell you this is Grantley Adams Airport, now you can see the tower ahead of us. You can see literally that you can't see anything at all. Indeed, instructions were given a couple hours ago to start the cleanup at the airport. And just before this press conference started, I received information that that effort has had to have been abandoned for now because visibility is so low again. And that what we're showing now is from this morning, not even this afternoon. And therefore they will resume in the morning again. And I think all Barbadians can see for themselves that this really is a most unfortunate development, and that the ash has the capacity to threaten everything as we go forward. Mr. Thompson, now is an appropriate time against those two shots. I think you have people's attention as to if the ash can do that to concrete outside and outside, what is it going to do to this air conditioning systems, et cetera, and how can you advise us going forward? Thank you.
Good afternoon, Prime Minister. Good afternoon, Barbados. Dr. George mentioned just now, and this is very important, as a medical expert, he advised that we should stay indoors, close windows and doors, and only traverse the outdoors when absolutely necessary. And I'm going to speak to you now as it relates to indoor air quality, indoor air comfort, and what to expect. And I'm going to preface it by saying that there are two impacts that we can have, one on the occupants of the spaces and then one on the equipment. Over the years, Barbados' development has, obviously we've developed to the point where the majority of our buildings, our occupied spaces, are serviced by air conditioning. What that means is that a properly designed air conditioning system for occupancy comfort should have some measure of outdoor air makeup, so that you take the outdoor air by certain percentages and you sort of freshen the air in the indoor space, obviously using filtration systems. What this ash would present is a dangerous situation as it relates to changing the indoor air environment. There are filtration systems, but at some point in time, based on the dense nature of the ashfall that we're getting at times, it is bound to be breached. Those filtration systems are bound to be breached. And we will then be introducing into the indoor space the potential for having ash, which will have very erosive effects, but also there are chemical constituents that we wouldn't want to have. And Dr. Joseph, I believe, will be able to speak on this, but the sulfurs and everything associated with that ash, you wouldn't want to introduce into your indoor space either. So from an occupancy perspective, we are recommending that if there is no need to be in an office to turn on an air conditioning, don't do it. You don't want to compromise your indoor air quality. You don't want to compromise the indoor space by introducing ash into the indoor environment. The cleanup session would not be desirable. First, you'd have the ash to deal with, and then you also have the chemical components to deal with. From the second perspective, which is the equipment, the volcanic ash, and it was mentioned before that as it gets wet, it becomes extremely heavy. It becomes a sludge. It is very erosive. It is not like the typical dust that we will be dealing with on a day-to-day basis. So imagine taking that dust, and I'm going to speak to you in simple terms. Imagine taking a piece of sandpaper and rubbing it over your conditioning equipment constantly. That is what you will be doing by operating your outdoor equipment. You're taking very erosive ash, blowing it with a fan across the coil, and asking that coil to be able to absorb the impact of that erosion. It will destroy the coil and the systems, the fans in no time. Similar to what Mr. Blackman would have mentioned for his generating equipment and the challenges associated with the filtrations, to ensure that the filtration systems are in place and properly maintained. So you have the issue of the erosive action on the coil. And secondly, Barbados is experiencing some rain. And the sludge associated with the ash will also choke the equipment. So you would find that the components will tend to fail because the ability of the air conditioning system to breathe will be significantly depleted. And you wouldn't want to put your equipment under that type of stress. So our recommendation is, unless it is an essential service, and we acknowledge that there are areas that cannot close. I mean, there are medical facilities that still have to operate. You have the data centers and other services, telecommunication centers, which need to service the island continuously. For situations like that, our recommendation is to do constant monitoring and constant servicing because we accept that those have to operate. But in situations where it is not essential, if you don't have to turn on your air conditioning, don't turn it on. That would be my advice to the island.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thompson. Prime Minister, at this stage, are you ready for questions?
I'm going to very short. No, I'm going to speak to the country a little bit first. But before I go there, Dr. Joseph, you sent a note in the chat about the long-term impact also on agriculture. Would you like to speak to that, please?
So as most people would remember, the ash fall does have a short-term impact on the agriculture, particularly banana crops and other agricultural crops, in terms of, killing or destroying the crops. So in terms of being able to support that type of agriculture, it will, the impact of that on the economy, is something to consider. In the long term, of course, after years, the ash, adds fertility to the soil, but the short term is that, it is likely to impact the economy with respect to the agricultural production on island.
Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph.
Thank
Prime
you.
Minister?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Joseph. Thank you very much, Mr. Blackman, Mr. Halliday, Mr. Thompson, Dr. George. As you can appreciate, ladies and gentlemen and friends, we would have thought that the majority of our challenges are starting to shift, but they're very much here. And that's why I use the word uncertainty all of the time. The bottom line is that I want to contextualize things for the country. In 1902, our great-grandparents and our grandparents went through a similar event. They did not have a Dr. Joseph to guide them through. They did not even have a Dr. Joseph to advise them or the people of St. Vincent that this was coming. It is for this reason, regrettably, that 1,500 people lost their lives in 1902 in St. Vincent. And when there was the subsequent volcanic eruption in Martinique, 29,000 people, I believe, passed, making it one of the deadliest volcanic eruptions in the Caribbean, if not the world, in the 20th century. Barbados is not a volcanic island, but we heard from Dr. Joseph why we are getting ash both from the east and from the west. And to that extent, our location has meant that we are visibly affected. I call it a snow day, not because I wanted to be facetious or use a cliche, but you saw the pictures just now of the airport and the Bridgetown port. Many of us have visited relatives overseas. We have relatives overseas. They will tell you that when it is winter and they have to literally shovel the snow, they can't wait until the snowstorm in some instances is done, because it then goes into ice and it then becomes more difficult for them to move. This is no different. We just simply need to take many bites at the cherry, as I said, and do not allow the ash to literally add up, because with the rain, the weight of it then becomes a problem. We already saw photographs coming out of St. Vincent yesterday of house roofs that have already been affected there. We do not want that to happen here. But at the same time, I've already advised you how dangerous and how hazardous it can be to clean the roofs, and therefore, or even to be on ladders or anything that may be slidey and slippery. And then if you fall, regrettably, you will hurt yourself or worse. So I'm asking persons, yes, to clean, but two, to do so with great caution. I'm asking people wherever possible to recognize that we're still in a pandemic, but I think that you now more than ever, thank God that we've already had the mass distribution for the pandemic, because this level of ash yesterday, my chest was heavy, and I'm not an asthmatic. So that I really worry about those who are asthmatic. And I say to Barbadians that at this point in time, we really, really need to just take the precautions in terms and allow common sense to be our guide in all of these matters. We're going to beat this with sense, as I told you, common sense and dollars and cents. Bottom line is, if you don't need to go outside, do not go outside. If you're not going outside to clean around your house today, stay off the road. We've already had to suspend some of the transport board's movements because, as you know, it is hazardous on the road, and therefore we do not want to compound the situations that we have with any type of other unfortunate incidents. There are some people, as Mr. Thompson just adverted to, who do provide essential services and will have to go on the road. And we ask, when that happens, that persons take extreme caution. We're not in a position to deal with knowing when this will end, but we know that we have to start the cleanup. And as a consequence, tomorrow must be seen as the beginning of the national cleanup, which may go on for as long as is necessary. But I've led the foundation for why we cannot leave it any further or wait for Seismic and others to tell us that it is over before we do anything. It must start as long as visibility allows and as long as safety can be guaranteed as far as possible. And to that extent, what I would like persons to do is recognize a couple of things. Tomorrow, persons who are essential workers should go to work. All businesses that require the environmental assessment and cleanup will require their staff to come in. It is not a bank holiday, but it is not, retail businesses will not be open to the public. I've met with the head of the private sector as well before coming on this call, and spoken also to the General Secretary of the Barbados Workers Union. I've not been able to speak to the head of the public service or the head of the National Union of Public Workers yet. That's why I said there's still a lot to be done. But I am saying to you that only government essential public services will open. We've gotten accustomed to this in the past. Those who can work remotely, please work remotely. Those of you, however, who know that you're necessarily involved in cleaning up, in environmental assessment, in any part of the engineering or technical departments of your business, of the government, then you will need to report to duty for duty in order for us to be able to do these assessments and to clean up properly. We are going to be talking with you on an ongoing basis. It may not always be me. It might be Wilfred, Minister Abrams, or it may be someone else. It may be the chief technical officers that you've been seeing. The most important thing in these matters is that we keep talking and we keep knowing together how we're going to move. I've said to you that in addition to the transport sector and work tomorrow, for the transport sector, there will also be a reduced schedule, and that will continue out of today. As soon, however, if there is a window of opportunity where we can go back safely to the full schedule, we will go back safely to the full schedule, and the public will be given a few hours notice. But at this stage in time, I've spoken to Minister Goodenedril and the unions, and we're all agreed that it is simply too hazardous to maintain a full schedule for persons at this point in time. There is an issue about the disposal of the ash, and we really need persons to put the ash in strong garbage bags and for them to be collected in open back dump trucks, not compactor trucks, not compactor trucks. The Sanitation Service Authority, I believe, has some nylon bags like feed bags. Hard Rock Cement, I'm told, has bags. We need to reach out to them. We need to reach out also. I know the supermarkets are not planning to open, but what I'm going to do is that if we can ask, and I'll give you a public notice on this because the head of the private sector is still working to see either supermarkets or hardware stores or whoever, who can we get to just distribute the bags, because people will need access to the heavy duty garbage bags. Why am I stressing this? We do not want you putting no ash in the gutters. We do not want you putting no ash in the sewers. If you do it, it is going to be your house that will get flooded out, because the water can block up, and the water then is going to flood out in at you when you least expect it and when you least want it. So I want Bajans, please, let's work together on this one. I do not want any ash in gutters. I do not want any ash in sewers. Take the ash, you hear me keep using the word muscles, and shovel it into the bags. And as I said, we need to make sure that when it is collected, keep the bags there until you can put them in an open back truck, and we take it from there to go on. I'm going to ask as well, Minister Walker is texting me as I speak to you, and he's reminded me that that we do need, Lisa, to get someone like Dr. Dawn Allen, who is a respiratory specialist at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, and at her convenience, if we can get her on early this afternoon or when she can, we'll try to arrange for her to speak to the Barbadian public, because I know that there are a lot of people who are deeply concerned about the impact that this is having. And of course, might I remind us that we've had 11 cases yesterday and 11 cases the day before, more than any of us had wanted or would want. We're not back at the numbers that we were, but by the same token, I'd like people to remember that the same mask is the platform for both of the battles that we're fighting here now, the volcanoes ash, as well as the COVID. But in addition, might I remind persons, and I saw some videos yesterday and it disturbed me deeply, because as a friend of mine asked, is this Poland or is this Barbados? Is this some other part of the world? Because it can't be here, not after what we've just gone through. And it cannot be that people believe that they can abandon all senses simply because we've said that we need to be able to step back, and we need to be able to see how we can manage these things. I want people to apply their hearts to wisdom and use common sense, because if we do that, we can get through this together. But what I don't want, I had cause as I passed the shop on Friday evening, all I did was to stop the car, roll down the window, and I didn't say a word. And immediately, all right, auntie, all right, mistress, we got it. And the mask went back up. We cannot drop our guard. And for those of you know, it is critical that we have, please, that we have persons cooperate together. There are a number of older people in our communities. Many of them live alone. This ash outside of their doors, if they've not cleaned it, may cause their doors, especially with the rain coming down, because you all have said it's like sludge. It may be difficult for that older person to open the front door or to open the side door where they normally come out, because the sludge is there. And then, of course, they're not necessarily as strong as they used to be, so that you don't want them falling. So what is my entreaty to you? I think you know it. We've done it already. Reach out to all of the elderly people around you and make sure, and don't just go and check on them, make sure the front door and the side door can open and that they can get in and out. The windows, you can hold off on a little bit. You understand? Because you really don't want the thing coming in. It's better to be a little hot and safe than to have this ash ingested in you. The last point I'd like to make on the water, Mr. Halliday spoke to it. The natural instinct is, let me go and wash this down. Let me wash this down. You've heard Dr. Joseph say over and over, sparingly with the water, because when you put too much water on it, that's when you get it heavy, and that's when your work, you're going to really need muscles then once you start putting the kind of water. But even with those who want to drive, can you imagine driving on the road now with your windscreen wipers dealing with this ash and the sludge? That's why I'm saying to you, do not play foolish, do not play brave, do not feel that you know everything and better than everybody else, because this is how accidents will happen. And finally, as it relates to the conservation of water, we do need you to conserve water, because we are in the dry season and we do have districts, as you know, that are already challenged. And therefore, if you don't need to do laundry every day, you don't need to do laundry every day. You can do the laundry now once or twice a week, please, and make sure you have a sufficient load so that the water stretches. And you can ensure that all of the other water conservation techniques, Mr. Halliday, can the Water Authority please put out the PSAs for them? And I know, and I can talk to you straight, there are a lot of us who like to bathe twice a day, but we're gonna have to probably hold it once a day for the next few weeks. Because why? Because at the end of the day, we need to be able to conserve the water to ensure that we have enough to go to everyone, while at the same time recognizing that while we don't have to use a lot of water to clean up, we still need to use some water, as they say, to keep the dust down a little bit, and then to make it more manageable for them to move, but not until the point where it gets like sludge. I'm going to stop for questions at this stage, but I've reminded you that let us try to be a little strategic with the questions, because I do want to make sure that SSA gets back out with the public notices, and I do need to see how we can deal with a better distribution system for these garbage bags, and I need to go and do that this afternoon. And we do also need to deal with where the SSA is going to be allowing persons to carry it, whether an abandoned quarry. They're working on all of that all like now. So there's still a lot to be done, but we felt that it was very important for us to reach out to Bajans and talk at this stage, rather than waiting to the end. For the same reason that we don't want to wait to the end to clean up the ash and the sludge, we don't want to wait to the end to talk with you, because we understand that people are nervous. I'll end on this point. You heard me talk about the fact that 100 years ago, your grandparents went through this in 1902, and they made it. They went through the pandemic in 1918-20 without the technology and the knowledge, and certainly the access to the vaccines that we have now. If they could do it without the tools that we have today, and we have the technology, we have the vaccines for vaccinations. We have the opportunity to communicate virtually as we're doing now, so that the mental space and fear of being alone can be dulled by us ensuring that we're sharing as much as possible and walking together as a people. If we have all of this, then surely if they succeeded as they did in 1902, and 1918-20, then we should be able to succeed and make this too. But it does require discipline, it does require caution, it does require cooperation, working together, it does require abandoning all of the foolish things that people want to do that will put their lives at risk, or those of their families and neighbors. And ultimately, it requires caring enough and going and looking for those elderly people, or those people who may be differently able and incapable of taking care of the cleanup in their house for whatever reason. Now is the time, therefore, for absolute cooperation at the public and private levels and across all sectors of society. If you do not need to go to work tomorrow because you're not an essential worker, or you are not involved in the cleanup or environmental assessments or technical assessments within your workplace, then please stay home and take care of what's wrong by you. If you need help from a neighbor, agree that I can work by you first, and then you come in by me to work together so that there is that cooperation. I'll pause at this stage, colleagues, Lisa, and let you manage the process for any urgent questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. We do have several media houses represented here, but unfortunately, given the unfolding situation, as you would have mentioned, we can only take 2 questions at this time. Dr. Joseph is also with us for a very short period of time. I'll go first to Kerry Gooding from Loop News. Kerry?
Hi, good afternoon. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, considering the nature of everything, I know the cleanup is the biggest concern from Dr. Joseph. I just want to know the frequency, because it's one thing to go and clean now, but persons want to know how frequently to clean. And for Dr. George, can you speak to the QEH in terms of the cleaning that is happening there? Because I know it's a window system usually, it's not air conditioned. Can you speak to the QEH and ambulance services?
Dr. Joseph?
Sure. So with respect to how often to clean, that would be governed by the amount of ash buildup. And remember, the eruptions are happening in pulses, meaning so far, we're seeing pulses of ash every 1.5 to 3 hours. This may change. But you may not be able to clean every 3 hours, but certainly, before the end of the day, you clean what you can, because you don't want that ash to accumulate to over, several inches of material sitting on your roof. So that's the only, guidance I can provide with respect to how often you have to just look at how much ash there is to remove and not leave it to accumulate more than several inches.
And I do believe, Dr. George, we wanted clarification on how the QEH was operating as it relates to the ash and then the ambulance service.
So what I could tell you is that the QEH has stood up their emergency management committee, and that is going to give advice not only to patient care, but also to the structural integrity of the building. So I'm sure that they will have those plans well advanced. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. George. Barry Allen from The Nation.
Hi, Dr. George, good afternoon. Quick question. Over the last 48 hours, we've seen quite a bit of ashfall in the northern part of Barbados. So I want to know if you could give us an update with respect to the isolation facility at Harrison Point. How are the personnel there faring, both patients and essential workers?
So far, so good. Dr. Corey Ford and his team did an inspection of the property yesterday, and there was no need for relocation or movement of patients out of either primary, secondary, or tertiary. So therefore, they are managing as best as possible in the situation.
And just a quick follow-up question, Dr. George. Dr. Joseph spoken about the fact that this ashfall could last days and going into weeks. Can you give us an idea of just how dangerous sulfur dioxide is to the bronchioles of the lungs for even healthy human beings, far less ones suffering from asthma or COPD?
So there are chronic effects that are associated with prolonged exposure to volcanic ash, but that is significant exposure over weeks and months. And I think that's why persons need to clear the immediate zone around the volcano. So I don't believe that for Barbadians, it will be really acute disease, but for persons who are within the zone, if they're exposed for long periods, they can have chronic lung disease, which is well described in the literature.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. George. We do have time for one more question. Ian Bourne from the Beijing Report. I do believe that you had a question.
Yeah, I wanted to know in regards to there's one view where we're said to stay inside, and yet at the same time, we're supposed to make sure that our roofs are not more than 4 inches of ash. So I'm just trying to find out, where do you balance the safety of the person versus the safety of the house?
Apply your hearts to common sense, Ian. I said it over and over. At the end of the day, if you can have somebody who is accustomed, who is a tradesman, who knows how to do that safely, then in a community, that's who you want to use. The bottom line is that if we don't do that, then both the roofs and the gutters are likely to cave in. And I see Dr. Joseph nodding her head very much there. So this is a matter where cooperation, partnership, helping out one another is what is going to make the difference in communities now. And as I said, we just need to make assessments. If you look on the roof and there's not a lot of dust there at this point, or ash there at this point in time, then you don't go up today. You certainly don't go up with today wet and rain. But if you look up there and you see a lot, then you really need to do. There's actually another picture going around, and I'll ask for the PMO, my office, to work with public affairs so that people can get a meme that shows them what this sludge looks like. It's almost like kicking up cement when you see it. So I really feel that people need to see it, but I want it to go around with the appropriate public affairs stamp, Wilfred, so that people know it is not fake news. Okay?
Just to add, Prime Minister, that with respect to the advice in terms of staying indoors, it means staying indoors, especially when the ash is actively falling.
Yeah.
You know, so that's the primary thing. When we first say stay indoors, it's when there's active, falling of ash. And when that is over, and if you want to clean in that period based on the thickness of the ash, then you can venture outdoors and see what you could do to help clean it off your roofs.
And let me remind Barbadians that the Department of Emergency Management is still open. And Minister Abrams is here. He will tell you that they will take calls. And we don't have shelters open, but if we have to open a shelter, we will open it up. But the truth is that with the pandemic, we know that most people will want to stay where they are. And it's a question of so long as they can be safe where they are, that's the best place. If you're not going to be safe, then pick up the phone and call the Department of Emergency Management, and we'll get through this together. So you have to be on standby for a number of further announcements with respect of the disposal of the ash, but please put them in bags and then wherever possible in open back trucks and not compactor trucks. Secondly, we will continue to have the PSAs out from the Barbados Water Authority and the Light and Power, and it may well be that it is better to do a joint PSA for the utilities rather than having too many things coming at people. Thirdly, that we will have a reduced schedule of transport board buses, and I would imagine PSVs. I want to appeal to the PSV drivers too. This is a very, very difficult environment to drive in out there. And we don't want, in fact, I want everybody driving slow. Because you ain't got nowhere to go today and tomorrow. So whoever driving, drive slow. Because what we don't want, don't drive for you, drive for the next man who's doing foolishness. And that way we can minimize any accidents on the road today. And I want us to remember as we end off this press briefing, that as bad as we think we are, our brothers and sisters in St. Vincent and the Grenadines today are worse off than we are. And they have not had the benefit of the water flowing through the pipes. I think they may have shut it off, Mr. Halliday, since yesterday, or certainly in parts. And Roger, I'm told that there also was some power, the power was shut down as well. So that, believe you me, you still have power, you still have water here in Barbados for the most part. You still have other things that we can do. But let us please remember that even as we find it difficult, and God knows it is difficult today for too many, that it's more difficult for others overseas. I also want to remind us, I've spoken every day to Prime Minister Gonzalez. He knows that we are more than prepared to take Vincentians here if they need to. Some of the evacuees, some have family here. But what has happened, and we expect that people want to stay as close to their family and friends as possible. And therefore, to the extent that some may not want to leave St. Vincent and the Grenadines at this point in time, the government of Barbados has said that we will work with them. We will make a financial donation, but I want to urge those Barbadians who can, and I know that there are many who can't because of COVID and because of the economic decline, but I also know that there are some who can. And the lesson that I tried to share, even when we received the vaccines a couple of months, 2 months ago, is that however small the gift is and the blessing that you receive from above, then you have it within you to share it. If it is a quarter, then a quarter can become an eighth when we cut it in half. If it is a half can become a quarter. If it is a whole can become a half. And however small it is, we can get through this only if we work together and be conscious of the fact that however bad we think things are for us, there are those for whom it is worse. And with respect to this being uncharted territory for us as adults and individuals, yes, it is, but it is not uncharted territory for our families or our country because we went through this together. There is one piece that I would ask when this entire production is over, Lisa, and I'm not sure if the technical team has put it up for me. It is actually, and it's a good example because it's another Caribbean person, Dr. Joseph, we had you here today. I thank you for sharing with us. But a lady by the name of Merle Collins, I believe she's Grenadian, reading from Kamau Braffett's wonderful poem called The Dust. And Kamau Braffett, as you know, is Barbados's most famous poet and the equivalent of a national literary genius as he was. And that poem is taken from the Rites of Passage, which he wrote, I believe, in the late 1960s. But it speaks to the dust that came in 1902. I can think of no more fitting way of ending this press briefing, apart from my usual words that I will come to shortly. But when this wraps up, for Barbadians to listen to this poem and to get to know it. And that's why our whole educational system needs to change up. I don't know how many children in our school system ever read any of Kamau's Rites of Passage in primary and secondary school. That's where we need to go. But listen to this poem. And today is Sunday. Today is Ramadan. Today is a period of reflection for so many across the world, but it must be a period of reflection for people in Barbados and preparing ourselves for the work that lies ahead in the national cleanup. And with that, therefore, as I said, with God on our side, we can have no doubts or fears. We will get through this as we have gotten through COVID and as we will get through whatever else they send at us. We are ready for it because we're going to do it together and we're going to do it with the right spirit. Thank you and God bless everyone, and thank all who participated in this press briefing on this Sunday afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. The Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor-Motley. We were also addressed by the Minister of Home Affairs, Information and Public Affairs, the Honorable Wilfred Abrams, Dr. Ursula Joseph, the Director of the University of the West Indies Seismic Research Center, the Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Kenneth George, Mr. Roger Blackman, the Managing Director of the Barbados Light and Power Company Limited, Mr. Keith Roy Halliday, the General Manager of the Barbados Water Authority, as well as Mr. Peter Thompson from TMR. Members of the media, thank you. Thank you at home for joining us. And we do invite you to enjoy this video now from Merle Collins.
We need volume.
His poem, The Dust, and that changed my perception of poetry. The Dust was published in his 1967 collection, Rites of Passage. Excerpts from The Dust. Evening, Miss Evie, Miss Maisie, Miss Maud. Olive, how are you? How are you, Evie, child? You take that miraculous bush for the trouble you're telling me about? Hush, don't keep so much noise in the white people shop. Every night before it gets into bed. I bet you're feeling less poorly already. I no pearly man, anyway the body am dead. No man, you're even looking more hearty already. Then all I can say, and I say it again, we got to thank God for small mercies. Amen, Evie child, and again I say is amen. Miss Evie, I want you to trust me, half pound of flour and 2 cake of soap till Monday come with the will of the Lord. Write 2 cake of soap and half pound of flour in olive black balance book for me, Maisie, my dear. And Olive, don't forget about the biscuit and saltfish your daughter Marilyn come here and say that you wish to take out last month. Monday, Davy, I settling her every brass bill and penny that owe in this shop, Miss Olive, my dear. Hey, Mary, you there? I see you there with your head half hide in the dark of that crocus bag. How Darrington mule? He's still sicky. And now I hear that the cow gone down too. It ain't give no milk since last Tuesday. It's a pestilence, man. Same kind of sickness like wickedness, man. Disfavor the youngs. Mr. Jilk say is a test of the times, like the 1914 and 18 war when they burn out the balls with that yellowing mustard gas. And if you ask me, there's soon going to be fresh wars and rumors of wars. You ain't hear the silence? Pastor said last night in the chapel that the writing hand on the wall. But that isn't all. You remember that story Grant tell us about Midas? No, what another fuss that? Well, it seemed like they have a mountain near here that always smoking and boiling like when your belly got bile. What you saying, child? But it's true. Now, how you know? Anybody live there? You know anybody from there who live out near here? Besides, where exactly you say this place is? That isn't your business. Besides, it's miles and miles from the peace of this place and is always purring and pouring out smoke. All I know is that one day suddenly so this mountain level one brother along go whole bloody backside of this hill like it blow off like they blasting stones in the quarry. Rocks big as your cow pen hoist in the air as if there was one set of shingles. That noise, Jesus Christ, must have rained down splinter and spark as if it was confederation. But you ain't got to call the Lord name in vain to make we swallow this tale. It ain't nice, Olive, man. It's true. And the Lord God knew that was sorry. But it black from that mountain back. In your face, in your food, in your eye. In fact, Granny say in the broad daylight, even the whitish skylight went out. And if you hear people shout, how they can't find a way, how they isn't have shelter, can't pray to no priest or no leader, and God gone and darkened the day. Gran say that even the fowls in the yard jump back on their cooks when the air turned grey and the cocks start to crow as if it was 4 morning. It went dark, as if it was night, and I frighten, when I hear things so. It's make me wonder and pray, because I say to myself, Olive, child, you just eat and sleep and try to forget some of the burdens you're back up to bear. You just drink, dance sometimes on a Saturday night, meet your man, and if God bless you, beget. Every day you see the sun rise, the sun set, God send every month a new moon. Dry season follow wet season again, and the green crops follow the rain. And then suddenly so, without rhyme, without reason, your crops start to die. You can't even see the sun in the sky. And suddenly so, without rhyme, without reason, all your hope gone. Everything looked like it coming out wrong. Why is that? What it mean?